Hey, welcome back to the channel. It's awesome that you're tuning in. So in today's video, it's time for this very strange sticky PC. Yeah, let me explain what I mean with that. So we have all kinds of very cool Gamebox PC solutions, and this is one of them. They are getting really cheap, but there was something wrong with this. So when I was doing the first unboxing, I noticed that this is very strange material. This is a 3D printed case, and if it's going to be any good, that's going to be finding out. However, we're going to be plugging it in and see if it's any good. At the back we're finding an HDMI, VGA, we have some USB ports, but when you're looking closely, it almost feels like they painted it. That there's something wrong with it. The RG45, not going to be using that, and there is nothing much actually. The on and off switch over here, and we do have all kinds of manuals that we need to scan the QR code. Important, do not update the game system. You know, that is a common thing they're using. Later on I'm going to be doing a quick teardown to see what kind of PC is inside. So when it comes to the controllers, it's unfortunate we're getting the fake controllers, and the overall quality you can just see when it comes to the buttons over here. It's not going to be any good. I really hate these things, seriously, like it's absolutely a big shenanigans. So let's check the power supply. The power supply is going to be in 12-volt 5 amp. Well, okay. They did give me the adapter that we're going to be needing to plugging it in. We're having another controller. Oh, and a manual. That doesn't even belong to the controller, or at least this is not the one that I'm getting. Okay, that's interesting, but wait at the same time. But the controller quality, it's the same stuff that we've seen so many times. It's very lightweight, there is no rumble function. On and off switch, we can open up the compartment, but it's quite, I wouldn't say difficult, but kind of weird. We do need two AAA batteries, so let's slap these things in and let's power it on. And also going to be plugging this thing in into the wall socket for giving some juice to the system itself. And a little bit of a downside and a little bit of detail, there were no extra, let's say, rubberized feet, so it's just making scratches on my desk over here. Great. Okay, I want to bring you with this adventure because sometimes these things don't even boot up the first time. The dongle needs to be plugged in, so that's what we're going to be doing first. So let's plug it into the console itself. It also came with an HDMI cable we're not going to be using because I have a better one. So let's plug this thing in. Let's see if we have a signal going on. Next up, let's boot it up. Ah, the PC is spinning. Holy crap, it makes a lot of noise, but they're just using these old parts for making a game box. Let's see if it's going to be booting up. Let's shut down some lighting in the studio. I do notice the LED, and there we go, the game's retro. Okay, that's going to be interesting. So let's see what we're getting with the menu. Do we getting any intro whatsoever? Booting up takes forever, that's one thing. They're using an old school hard disk. Oh, they do have like this fancy menu. But shall we start off with the specifications? So it's quite interesting to see that they're using different parts now. So this is the Intel Celeron CPU, the 1037U, running on 1.80 GHz. That's actually just a CPU dual core, or with two cores. Temperature is going to be 51 Celsius, just as it is. So it's going to be a little bit more hotter when we're actually going to be playing games. The specs of this thing only having an open GL3.0, and that can give us a little bit of, let's say, compatibility issues with some emulators. However, we're going to be looking at it later on. The menu is in kind of very cool. I think this is the PlayStation X overall design, and this seems to be looking quite nice. So when it comes to overall emulation performance, we can expect, I want to say, great things. But for a cheap box, under $100, this is going to be in quite overall interesting, let's say, thing we can do. So I also have the option for Windows games. Of course, it's going to be very limited with a couple of them. Xbox, PC Engine, and all kinds of stuff. However, if you're going to be looking into the old game boxes, yeah, Super NES, Game Boy, the stuff like that we could play before. With N64, there is going to be interesting. We do even have some GameCube that is compatible, but if it's going to be running great on this, that is of course a different question. And a lot of different devices will struggle because it is going to be a very old CPU. But this is kind of interesting. I love the layout of this thing. And we're going to be doing a deep dive into some games to see what we can actually play. I love it that you can actually move the volume control with the right joystick. So let's look into the PlayStation, and the overall design of the layout is quite nice with some text and even having a lot of pictures and information. So when you're looking just the way how it is, this is kind of cool and I just love it. However, the question remains, for example with Assault Rigs, can we boot it up? How fast will it boot up? And do we have the audio quality? So we do have some rewind and forward, stuff like that. Loading times will be significant faster than normal, let's say in disk itself, but that is not the thing I'm looking for. The thing I'm looking for actually is going to be, can we play the games without any hiccups, and do we have audio? I love the bezels, but you can just actually hear there is no audio, or at least I can tell you there is no audio, and that's quite unfortunate. That is something they mess up with, actually, like ripping the ISO files. No, there is no audio. And that's a returning problem with many game boxes, to save up space and to slap more games on the device. Press select start, we'll go back into the main menu itself. But the overall performance of PlayStation is remarkable, and we have so many different devices that we can actually use this now with. So when you're going to be looking into some different games, I still have a lot of problems with the audio, where Tenka is, so far I understand, not a game with a lot of soundtracks, but you know what I love about these boxes, when you're going to be scrolling through a couple of them, you will find games I completely forgot about in the collection, like Tenka. Such a cool game. But I want to be clear that not every single game has a problem with the audio. That's why I actually started up this particular game, to showcase there is music. We're always complaining on these, let's say, cheap PlayStation 2 knockoff things. I am quite surprised how good it so far performs. The joystick seems to be working fine. I don't notice any weird thing going on. So all the functionalities, if you're going to be playing some PlayStation, this seems to be working just fine here. The PlayStation 2 list is quite remarkable when it comes to, let's say, the way how it looks and everything else. But how is the overall emulation performance? That's what I'm very curious about. Because that would be a very cool extra thing if you can play PlayStation 2 with perfect emulation on a device like this. But so let's start off with making a save file on the emulator, and that part seems to be working fine. I did notice some hiccups here and there in the beginning of the audio, so let's get quickly into the gameplay itself. Oh, you can already hear from many parts. Oh, a lot of weird glitching going on. You can see the shaking of the screen. And it's just a little bit of a downside with PlayStation 2. You know, we're pushing it. Where PlayStation 2 is quite difficult to emulate, particularly if we're going to be using very old specification when it comes to hardware. We have seen a lot of mini PCs, same struggle with PlayStation 2, and we're having an old school mainboard with such an old Acceleron CPU. It's going to be the same situation all over again. So let's go back to the main menu. I wanted to give it another attempt, but this time I want to use a two-dimensional game. They are most of the time less demanding for the CPU to emulate. I did see some glitches in the beginning, but this game seems to be working like it should be. No problem there. Otherwise I have no idea how to do the super move. It's always funny that they're having only one single game on this with the Xbox Classic system. Yeah, and I can tell you that this particular game, maybe if it even runs great, it's still not going to be an overall great performance with Xbox Classic, because it's quite difficult to emulate in general. Okay, when it comes to overall emulation, I can do see and hear that it does struggle, but we do have overall great performance with Jet Set Radio, so that's kind of funny. It is actually playable, so it would be fun to see if we can test some more games in the future on such a cheap device like this. So let's get into some N64 to see how this will overall emulate. I already mentioned before, with these mini PCs, even they are super old, the overall performance can be so much more better than with the other ones that we have seen before. Think about the S905 chipset, that has such a problem with most N64 games. So let's get into some N64 gaming. I just want to try a couple of games to see how the overall performance is. So far, so good. I've seen some games running quite good on this. Oh man, where are the buttons? Oh, there we go. No! Cruis'n USA is one of those games that always struggles on those game boxes that we've tested before. But so far so good, and the overall performance is so significant better. So far I have tested with many devices. Okay, so this does actually playable, but I noticed the controller, the back button is really bad. But the gameplay, it's nice. Yeah, there is no stuttering, it's still native resolution. But it's just amazing to see how great it works. And if you're going to be looking into the price point of this particular, let's say, system, and the ones that we have seen and basically tested about many times before, it's not a bad deal at all when it comes to that. And so far I've been testing out some different games too. Emulation performance is just great on this. So, but also another side of it is that you can just see how much performance you're getting for a lot of, let's say, difficult to emulate systems on such an old school, let's say, Celeron processor. So where they're just recycling, and that's a good thing, they're just recycling old hardware that would be like e-waste forever. Now we can actually play thousands of games. Next up, some GameCube, and the reason why, because this is one of the systems some people were asking me about. However, take note is that this is going to be a hit or miss situation. It's quite interesting to see how some of the games will run. And the overall performance is quite good so far. But getting into the gameplay, it's going to be dipping like crazy with the frames per second. You can just hear the audio stutter like crazy. And yeah, GameCube is one of those systems like PlayStation 2. Two-dimensional games will have maybe impossibility to run. But getting into, let's say, some three-dimensional stuff, fighting games, this is not the way how you want to play. And it is just pushing this device way too much. But let's move on to some other stuff that can be actually played. So for example, Atomiswave. So you know the game Dolphin Blue that has so much struggles on those low-end chips. And with this, we should have so much better performance. So let's look into this. Like always, the audio is like 20 times more louder than all the other games. However, the emulation performance of Atomiswave is no problem anymore. And that is just amazing. I might have this, like the idea that I have to do a little bit of delay over here. And only particular with this emulator. But beside that, I think that is one of the greatest things when it comes to these older mini PCs, that the performance are so much more significant better than the game boxes itself. But Sega Saturn does struggle on this box, and Daytona is completely unplayable with stuttering and very low frames per second. So that is unfortunate. Where we do have some game boxes with general better performance. And yeah, what we can actually do with this is going back to the main menu, try to swap the emulator if you want to. So what you're going to be doing is holding the X button, and in here we're having then advanced games options. And with the emulator has been set to auto, we can change it out to something different. Chronos, Yabashenshiro. So let's say Yabashenshiro. Let's try that and let's boot it up. In short, it doesn't boot up. So let's move on to another game like Die Hard Arcade and see how that will run. Because there's another great one and a very cool one to emulate. And it's going to be quite difficult. The emulator has been set to auto now because I only change it out for the certain game in the advanced settings. But the intro also does a lot of stuttering, so that's not going to be a great sign. So messing with the emulators, I noticed that putting it on auto is not going to be fixing any problem. Swapping to this Yabashenshiro, I think it's not even compatible with this particular, let's say, mainboard, or there is something wrong because it doesn't boot up anyhow. So yeah, messing with the Yabashenshiro was not the solving problem, getting overall better support when it comes to the games. It stutters, it makes a lot of noise, and yeah, it's unfortunate. Dreamcast is maybe playable, but Saturn not. So let's move on to the Dreamcast. It also implements the widescreen emulator modification, so that also explains why it looks kind of weird at the sides, but beside it, the emulation performance is great, native resolution. We can always like mess around with it, doing a little bit of, let's say, tinkering, but when you're going to be looking at it, I think it looks amazing this way. We have a good overall emulation performance, with a little bit of hiccup there, but besides that, no problem whatsoever. I just wanted to try another game because Dreamcast has such an amazing performance with Dead Alive 2. One of my favorite games, I think one of my maybe in the top 5 is going to be Power Stone 2. Which position I don't know, but this is such a fun game to play. I grew up with the Smash Brother game and this was for me the next level. It's completely something different. With the Power Stone you need to collect, getting superpowers. This game was absolutely great and the performance is just amazing. So take note, with Sega Dreamcast we do have a lot of, let's say, cheap game sticks and other game books that we can actually play this with. But this is a great example of a very old PC that I'm using and we can still use this freaking awesome, let's say, machine for Dreamcast emulation. So moving next to the Sega NAOMI, the arcade part, with some old school GigaWing. Ooh. It is a little bit more difficult to emulate, or that's the idea I'm always getting. Also here I do have this idea that we have like an input delay. The analog stick doesn't do anything. Yeah, the delay is maybe something between my ears, but you know, beside that, well, we had some hiccups in the beginning. It's also on just native resolution, no craziness, but everything looks kind of nice. So PlayStation Portable is a system that will not run great on this. So I think we need to utilize this for basic gaming. So let's grab ourselves some Bomberman. Just native resolution and just see how it is going to be actually running. So where this game actually starts up, there's already a first major miracle and has some overall okay performance. So when you're going to be looking into the freaking gameplay, you can just hear from the beginning audio that it really struggles already. And this is not even a game that takes up a lot of power. So let's start the stage and let's see how the overall performance will be. Loading times are very fast. Okay, there we go. Getting into the game. It's playable. And that's what we're going to be having with PlayStation Portable. Some games run great, some will run absolutely horrible. But I think the most interesting games that we can actually play on something like this is going to be the, let's say, just basic mini games they call them. And some of them are absolutely great. I think Heroes of Sparta is one of those very cool, let's say, Diablo clones, and many of the other ones. Jetpack Joyride, oh yeah. Okay, so this is a great way to check out if you have any delay, because this is a game that is absolutely based on timing. But no, so far no problem whatsoever. So when it comes to playing some PlayStation Portables, you should think about the basic games that can be played on this old school dual core Celeron. We did have like some screen tearing, but pressing select and start will automatically go back to the main menu. I didn't notice any way to actually get into, let's say, the special menu to start tweaking. So there we have so many different like systems. So I want to be clear that I'm not the biggest fan of the Amiga or Commodore 64, where we're actually going to be needing a keyboard, or at least a keyboard product. So Amiga 32 CD would be maybe impossible to play, but the overall experience is going to be, let's say, okay. But we're going to be into a PC Engine. There we're having not even pictures, that's a little bit of a downside. But getting into these games, you know, they will run just great when it comes to that. 60-bit, 8-bit, you know, that will run just fine without any problem whatsoever. And we do have so many Gamebox devices that can actually play this now. So particularly when it comes to, let's say, the Mega Drive or Genesis part, where you're having just $9 plug and play like sticks that has the great overall emulation performance now. PC Engine, a different story, but also this can be played on so many different devices now. But this is absolutely a trip of pure nostalgia when it comes to, let's say, many different titles. So first of all, having over here the Doom, the real DOS version with the port list. There are a lot of cool games. We have seen these also on the handhelds with Quake 1, Wolfenstein 3D, Port, of Duke Nukem 3D, you name it, and they just play amazing. I love it that they're having like bezels at the side. Okay, there we go. Oh, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened with my freaking shoot button. Oh, there we go. When looking into the settings menu, you can change out all kinds of stuff. You can still dig through the system. So let's say if you want to set up new controllers, you can just do that fairly easy. Control mapping, everything is open. So we just can mess around with the system if you want to. I already mentioned with the emulator if you want to. Information, something I already showcased. If you have no audio output, you can mess around with the audio output over here. And that is one of the many things you can do actually inside of the system. But let's open it up. I started opening up at the top part. That was not a good idea at all. But let's do a quick teardown. I just want to remove the 4 screws over here. Let's see what happens over here, because I'm just struggling to get this thing open. I think the best way is just actually using the bottom screws. And just remove all of them. Whoa, they are freaking long. Okay, so this is what we're going to be finding in the inside. So at the left we're finding a very old school SATA drive. This is not even a 500 gigabyte, it is actually in 640. So we're giving us a bigger drive than normal, but you can see how filthy it is. So how much spinning time it has. Maybe we should hook it up to another computer to check it out, but it's going to be maybe a lot. It's very filthy. At least they should like clean it up. The PCB of the main board, that looks actually quite good when it comes to that. There is no like a lot of upgradability. There's only one single RAM module possible with this one, or so far I can actually see. So that's a loss. That's absolutely a downside. So the cooling itself is quite hot. This cable is just dangling around, but there is not a lot of stuff we can do. So if this thing doesn't boot up, you can also do reinserting of the RAM module. I've noticed it with previous model that was one of the solutions. But beside that, this thing is just laying in the inside. That's it. The only thing that holds it actually when going to be putting it together. Construction wise, the case is quite ugly. I also know that it had like very cool like translucent versions. If it's all like all the same parts, I don't know. This one actually boot up and seems to be working just fine. So if you're going to be looking at the price point you're paying for this and what it can actually do, the performance is not bad at all. However, if you want to get into some emulation of, let's say, PlayStation 2, GameCube, we're going to be needing more power and also resulting in more, let's say, cost, because we're going to be needing another PC with better performance. Thank you all for watching. Consider subscribing, hit the little bell. Let me know in the comments, what do you think of this gamebook? Do you think it's worth it? And yeah, the sticky case is not going to be making it any better. Thank you all, and it would be great to see you in the next video.